Hello and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about self-healing, relationships, and whatever else comes into a conversation with Stephen Levine. Stephen Levine is a teacher of meditation and counselor of people with terminal illnesses. For 7 years, he directed the Hanuman Dying Project, which he started with Ram Dass. Stephen is a consultant to hospices, hospitals, and meditation groups around the country. He co-wrote Grist for the Mill with Ram Dass and is the author of A Gradual Awakening, Who Dies, and Meetings at the Edge. How is it that some people are healed and some are not?
I don't know. Also, it's interesting when we talk about healing. My conditioning, your conditioning is that healing is if the body changes and doesn't hurt anymore, it's healed. On the other hand, it's like we were working with a woman who had come into a hospital in a great deal of discomfort. A woman who had lived her life in a tremendous amount of isolation, to the point where her children were not by her, grown children were not by her bedside. The people she had worked with in business, she'd antagonized and pushed away. She was very aggressive and very, really nasty. And she kind of drove the nurses away, too. So she was literally dying alone, alone with her pain and her confusion. And for the first 6 weeks she was in the hospital, as she got sicker, as she was in more pain, she had just driven everybody away from her. One night, 6 weeks into her experience, she's laying there at 3 a.m. with this tremendous pain in her spine, in her hips, and in the back of her legs, laying on her side, just wishing she could die, just hating life, hating herself, hating her body. And all of a sudden she got this experience that she wasn't her laying on her side, but a black woman laying on her side in Biafra with an empty breast suckling a starving child. And the woman and the child were dying. And this woman too had excruciating pain in her back and in her hips and the back of her legs. And she started to feel that she was this other woman dying. Then she had an experience of an Eskimo woman in birth, in a very extreme crisis situation. Extraordinary pain in the back, in the hips, and the back of the legs. In the next couple of hours, as dawn came up, she experienced herself as all these other beings in this unbearable pain. And she came out of it with the feeling, this is not my pain, this is the pain. And it started to turn for her. It was no longer, oh, poor me, but look at the immensity of the pain in the world. How can I keep my heart closed even a moment longer? In the next 6 weeks, until she died, her heart opened so much that her room became the place that the nurses started to hang out on their break because it was the place of love. She died exquisitely in the sense that she just died surrounded by love. Her children were there. In fact, one of the nurses happened to have the picture of Jesus as the Good Shepherd with the children and the animals. And this woman who had lived her life in such arrogant, nasty separativeness looked at that picture and she said, oh, Jesus, forgive them. They're only children. I consider her healed, although her body didn't stay alive. I think maybe what she took birth for was accomplished. So I have come in my work not to limit my idea of healing to the body, because I see people who have healed their body and so dissociated from their family and loved ones that their healing created more unfinished business. And I see the people sometimes who get into that struggle of hatred at the body to heal. If they die, if they don't happen to heal, they often die with such feelings of self-hatred and feelings of being a failure. So, I think healing has to do with the heart, not the body.
Okay, so we can redefine healing in that sense, and obviously we have a different perspective. But if we go back to the original concept as it was put forward in the question of saying healing, that is, the body gets better, is there anything, if that is a goal, and it is a goal for some people, obviously you'd like to heal the heart and the soul,
Right.
preferably before the body even, so that things take their proper priority. But if there is some impact in the physical healing process, is it something that we can determine? Is a state of mind necessary in order for the physical body to heal? Or are you saying that...
Actually, I think you're right on the mark with that one. At home, we have a huge library of books of all the different, hundreds of different healing forms: fever therapies, urine therapies, chemotherapies, wheatgrass, Gerson method, myriad therapies. All of those books were given to us by patients after they died. And I used to look at those books and really see that no method, my sense is that no healing method may be any better than any other. But it's the kind of attitude that touches that method that lets the healing in. And it may be for some people that Western therapies done through the heart are the optimum strategy for healing. For somebody else, that isn't appropriate. They can't open their heart to that one. Acupuncture, wheatgrass therapy, nutritional methods, very potent. But I don't think it's the method. I think it's the heart that draws on the method. I think it's the same as spiritual practice. I don't see any more enlightened Hindus or Jews or Christians or Buddhists. I think that there's always a few shining beings. And I think that's the heart of the matter that heals. I've seen people heal from almost every method I've seen. A few people heal. So I don't know that there's any method. I think one has to see what their temperament is and see what method they're drawn to and then do it wholeheartedly.
What does your story suggest about the nature of pain? What is it? What is pain? Physical pain?
Somebody once said to me that they felt there was a distinct possibility that what we call pain is actually resistance to pain. And that it was very possible, and I don't know how we'd ever prove this, it's very possible that if a person had no resistance, they'd have no pain. I don't know. Because that resistance is so deeply inculcated. I mean, it's imprinted from the first boo-boo, when it's treated as an urgent situation and where our aversion to the unpleasant is so profound. We work a lot with people in pain. We've found for people in pain, the key word, for instance, is softening, not relax. Relax has a hard quality to it. I mean, even the word, and our conditioning around relax is very funny, because how did we learn that? We learned it by somebody saying, relax. Somebody who was not relaxed at the time, transmitting a concept. So there was no real message in that one.
Or a nervous doctor saying, try to relax.
Exactly. But the word soften, it goes to the very physical, just to soften. We work with a lot of people who are learning to start to let their pain float, to soften around the pain, to soften the flesh, the ligaments, right almost to the marrow, so that the tension, the grasping, that fist of fire that contracts around pain can start slowly to open. In fact, literally, we know people who visualize, who when they go to the place of pain in their body, can feel this contraction like a fist. And they'll close their eyes and visualize that fist opening around their pain, and the pain starting to float. And now, again, it's like any method. For some people, I've seen people go from sizable amounts of analgesic to none. But the miracle stories are always, no matter what we're talking about, beside the point. For the average person, I see, it's kind of like, I was working with a 14-year-old boy who I love very much, who's got leukemia, who actually lives here in San Francisco. And he was asking me about pain. And the way we talk about pain, fist and this and that and the other thing, in his metaphor, it was too abstract. And I had to find a place where I could communicate with his heart. And I noticed the image coming up. I said to him, if you're in a room and there's a huge fire in the middle of that room, you say, well, I'm going to put out that fire, analogizing the fire to pain. The closer you try to get to that fire to put it out, the more you're going to get burned. And the more there's no corner in the room that you can hide in where it just isn't too hot to bear. But if you keep concentrating on putting out the fire, you're just going to get disintegrated by the fire. The work is not to put out the fire. The work is to knock down the walls of the room. Let the fire go. Let it be. You don't have to be so close to it, though. You can experience what's called pain in a different space. The pain will be there, but it won't be as much of a problem because there'll be more room for it to float in. And I think that's what most of our work with people in pain is, encouraging them to expand through guided meditations, through psychological investigation, through watching the attitude. It's very interesting. When you go into pain, if you really go into the moment-to-moment sensations in pain, you'll often find an attitude. Some people find, for instance, the attitude of shame or feeling of failure around their pain. Just when they need their mercy the most, they're being the most merciless with themselves. And that's the other level that we're saying about levels of pain and levels of healing, too.
What about the attitude of an individual who says they're going to beat it? They're going to beat pain, or they're going to beat terminal illness, and every once in a while you'll read the story in the newspaper or hear about it from someone that so-and-so was just so devoted to the conquest of that pain that they actually did it. They put their cancer in remission.
I think for some people's temperament, that works. For some people's temperament, because that's something we're all encouraged to do, pain as an emergency. For some people's temperament, that's very destructive. And I've seen people who have beat their pain and lost their love in their life. They've had to put themselves, they've had to put their body, they've had to put the day so far out of their heart that they've kind of won the war and lost the battle. But for some people, there is no one way. For some people, that is their dignity. I have a good friend who was in the Second World War, and he says, my way is to be a soldier. And I fight pain like a soldier, and I'll die like a soldier. Now, to take that away from him, to try to, quote, spiritualize him, which would be really fascistic, would be to take away his ground. One of the things that's very important when we're working with people who are ill, people who are dying, people who are in pain, if you're working with somebody who's dying, not to make them die the way you would like to die, but to encourage them and support them to be themselves at that moment. And in healing, there's such an element of self-trust necessary that I wouldn't change a person's way unless they asked. And then we would, work together to kind of braille our way toward what was the most appropriate way for them. We often talk about a situation. Take two people, and I've seen this happen. Take two people who have the same illness. And we'll say they have relatively similar temperaments, relatively similar disease, similar life situations. One says, I'm going to beat this. It's me against my disease, which also means it's me against my body. And also may mean that resistance, that fist that has closed around their illness, is also limiting not only pain medications entering, but healing medications entering. They have walled off the illness. They may be walling off their heart. They may be walling off from their family. Now we'll say this fellow who has fought, or this woman who has fought very hard against the cancer, against the degenerative heart disease, whatever it is. And we'll say she survives, he survives. What's the legacy of that? Now they've gotten their life and they've gotten their body, and no one can underestimate the desire to survive for another. And they've left around them a legacy of anger and hate and disconnection. But they're still alive because they've had to cultivate so much aggressiveness. Now, we all have so much aggressiveness as it is. I think aggressiveness could be skillfully cultivated. So it was done in a certain way that you realize the context of the body, but I'm not the body. But we'll still play the game of healing the body. And then you could have that kind of aggression, but you wouldn't have separated from anyone. Take that same fellow, we'll say he dies. Now, what kind of legacy has he left? Separation, unfinished business, anger, confusion. Take that another person, similar situation. He says, well, here I have a disease, here I have pain, and it's about time I started paying attention to my life. I mean, how long am I going to be able to live a life so partially? I've never been so awake to how asleep I've been. and they start to take the teaching from the illness, and they are working as hard as the person who was aggressive toward their illness. But instead of sending anger and fear into illness, they start to send love and kindness into it. When you and I, when most people stub their toe, hit the thumb with a hammer, our conditioning is to send hatred into our pain. If we want to make peace in the world, we're going to have to start touching the pain of the world with forgiveness and love. Because we know, how do you heal? Just when you most need mercy, when that thumb is throbbing and you send hatred into it, we just see how we constantly close ourselves off, how little real healing we allow. So this fellow who is sending love and mercy into his pain, we'll say he dies. We'll say it doesn't work for him. But what has he left behind? He's left behind love and care and mercy and healing. We'll say he stays alive. What has he left behind? He's a continuing collaboration with the people he loves. Now, I'm oversimplifying it, because I know there are people listening right now who say, that's a lot of bull. My way is to create a backfire to burn out the fire in my body. All I could really say is to do that with as much heart and as much balance as possible, to trust your way, to do it the way that feels appropriate to you, but recognize the larger context in which it's all happening.
Does that suggest that people who have severe pain or a terminal illness have, in fact, an advantage over the rest of us that are just walking around, eating, breathing, sleeping, living very normal, mundane
Slow,
lives?
smoldering suffering.
Yeah. In terms of the potential for love and goodness and
the thing
spirituality.
Is, awareness seems to heal, and pain catches our attention. I mean, if we pay as much attention to the toast popping out of the toaster, we'd have the same advantage. We'd have the advantage of seeing how precious this moment is, how much it's not just our pain, but that there are 10,000 people. As that woman said, who laid on her side at 4 a.m, she said she realized there were 10,000 women in exactly the same situation that very moment. And she started to feel something of the universal in what we normally think of as the separate. But it's not the pain that did that. It was the awareness and mercy we brought to the pain. Pain catches our attention. Even for spiritually oriented, meditative, investigative people, I would say it's a relatively advanced stage before they start paying attention to the pleasant states. We pay attention to the unpleasant states very rapidly because they fill up our whole field of resistance. When we're happy, sometimes we're at our most asleep. In an odd way, there's a place inside of us that when we are most at ease, we may be the furthest from God, because we may be most lost in that this is who we are, and if this could go on forever. Where when we're in pain, we know how precious spaciousness, kindness, softness is. But it isn't the pain that did it. It's our birthright. It's the awareness we were born with that does it.
What is forgiveness, and is it important?
Forgiveness is letting go of... I feel like the answer, man.
Good. Well, I hope you are.
I'm listening to this myself. Pain is letting go of resentment. Excuse me. Forgiveness is letting go of the pain of resentment. Forgiveness is done for oneself. If I forgive you because I'm angry at you, it may be of use to you, but it's even of more use to me to forgive you, because the place where I'm holding my heart tight against you, I will hold my heart tight against all those same qualities in myself. And I will also, if to a degree I put you out of my heart, I have to close my heart in some little place. It's too big a trade-off. It's too expensive. Now, we're going to have anger. It arises naturally. It's one of the top 40. You can count on it. But we can meet anger with a little more awareness and a little more mercy and a little more forgiveness, so that when it comes up, that our anger at someone else doesn't become a curse on ourselves. Forgiveness is kind of demagnetizing that separateness between you and I which means between me and some part of myself. So forgiveness is a very skillful means to let go of that quality of pain we experience, which is resentment. It also has a tremendous healing quality. We know people, for instance, most people who are very ill will at one time or another have hatred toward their body, feel that their body defaulted on them, that it didn't stick by them. You know, I've been feeding you all these grains, I don't put meat in you, I don't put alcohol in you, and you come down with cancer. What an SOB you are. The people I know who are sending forgiveness into their cancer, what a miracle. I mean, instead of touching the cancer with hatred, with self-loathing, to start to touch ourselves with mercy is a level of healing beyond description. Now, some of the people we work with who are doing that are also seeing healing coming out of it in a different way than any other method they've used. Some people's tumors seem to, and this is just my sense of it, some people's tumors seem to shrink when you touch them with care and mercy instead of the fire of anger and disgust. Forgiveness is a very skillful thing to bring into your life. It gives you space in your life. I mean, I know many people who will spend maybe 15 minutes in the morning just bringing into their mind someone who they may have anger at and touching them just with the possibility, no force, no urgency, of forgiveness. And then bringing in someone who's angry at them and just touching them for a moment with the possibility, cultivating the state of mind, the quality of forgiveness. And then turning to themselves in their own heart and saying, I forgive you, to you. Calling themselves by their own first name, saying, Stephen, I forgive you. And finding a warmth. I mean, that's 15 minutes. And it may sound corny, but you can't tell what the water feels like until you jump into it. And many people find that when they add 15 minutes even of a forgiveness contemplation in their lives, that their lives take on a softness, that they're not, one of the things that forgiveness does is it starts to make you less afraid. Gives you more room for things.
One approach to a spiritual path is the approach of detachment, removing oneself from oneself and other things and getting a little perspective. Another approach that you've talked about in the healing process is sending love, a specific focus on it. Right. It's the fist or whatever, and it's the fire, and you focus on the fire and direct your energies directly at that. Is there a contradiction there, or how do the two work together, the focusing and the detachment?
The balance of that one is you really can't let go of anything you don't acknowledge. So you have to be able to allow something to arise into awareness. Letting go means the same thing as letting be. You have to let it be. To let it be, you have to break that severe negative or positive identification with it. So detachment has a funny word. You know, non-attachment is not detachment. Non-attachment may at last allow you to go to the center of the thing. We are detached right now. Non-attachment allows us to participate in the field of experience without forcing it to move one way or another, to allow, if you will, creation to unfold, and to participate in creation in the act of becoming. It means to allow the space for things to be, which means a non-judgmental mind, a non-closed heart. You have to let it float so that you can meet it with care and love. There's a real balance of not being attached to the pain so that you can meet it in a very wholehearted way. Not being attached to pain is easier said than done. In spiritual circles, the attachment to non-attachment is a kind of sickness. Not to be anyone but ourselves. Non-attachment can be to allow this moment just to be as it is, with just a moment more of mercy and awareness. Just as is. Not to change it. Letting go does not mean suppression. It means letting it float, letting it be, letting it present itself. Non-attachment to anger would allow anger to arise in the mind so that you could really start to get the feeling of the texture of it, how it patterns in the body, how it tape loops in the mind. You'd have to be able to accept it, which means not be attached to it. You'd have to be able to accept it in order to investigate it.
We don't have, in our remaining moments, the time to go through an entire meditation, which we assume would take some period of time, maybe 15 minutes. But could you outline one that one person listening right now could do immediately following the program, either
How much time
exercise
how much
or
time do we
meditation?
have?
Oh, we've got 3 or 4 minutes.
Let's do a short one.
Okay.
Just let your eyes close and let your attention come into the body that just sits here. Feel the scintillation, the movement in the body of sensation. Feel the pull of gravity on the body so that you begin to tune in on the density, the heaviness of this solid body. Just allowing awareness to come to the level of sensation generated in the body. The experience of life in the body as sensation. Not thinking the body, not thinking arms and legs, but experiencing the body as sensation. Feeling its heaviness, its substantialness. But notice that each sensation is received by a body of awareness within this heavier body. Sort of a light body within the denser earthen body. Feel how that light body permeates the denser body. How each breath drawn in through the dense body is received as sensation by the body of awareness within. Feel how that light body is drawn by sensation anywhere in the denser form. And let that body of light, that body of awareness, come to any place of pain or illness or discomfort with mercy and loving kindness, so that that pain can be touched by something lighter than the old resistance and fear, so that pain, that injury, can be touched by awareness and mercy, so that maybe for the first time pain is touched with tenderness and care instead of fear and denseness.